Driving down a highway puts very little force on a vehicle's steering system because there isn't much steering action even through curves. City driving, parking, and docking maneuvers, though, use increased steering wheel movements. From the time a turn is started until it's finished, pressure and heat build up in the steering system. They are highest if you continue to try to turn when you reach the axle stop. When the axle stop is contacted, there is a lot of force on the linkage, and the temperature in the hydraulic steering system is increased, which could cause unnecessary load to any of those parts. What does all this have to do with poppets? Poppets reduce pressure just before axle stop contact. That reduces the temperature in the hydraulic system and force on the linkage before they become harmful. This is how it works for TAS gears. When the steering wheel is turned, it rotates the column, and the column rotates the steering gear's input shaft and worm screw. Because of a recirculating ball nut mechanism, this motion makes the rack piston move in the gear. You can see the poppet sticking out of the rack piston on both ends. As the rack piston moves toward the lower end, the poppet will contact the fixed stop bolt or adjusting screw. When the rack piston moves toward the upper end, the input shaft end, the poppet will contact the valve housing. When the poppet on either end of the rack makes contact, it is pushed slightly off the poppet seat. This gap allows pressurized fluid to pass through, which reduces pressure. All we have to do to make sure pressure reduces just before axle stop contact is made during a turn is to set the poppets so they make contact at the same time the axle contacts the axle stop in both turns. In TAS gears, there are two poppet seat and sleeve assemblies that are screwed into the rack piston. The poppets fit inside the poppet seats. The nylon spacer rod is inside the spring, and the spring is inside the push tube. The spring is held in place on both ends by the large ends of the two poppets. Poppets are set when the poppet seat is pushed into the poppet sleeve to a depth that relates to the axle stop setting for each truck. This allows the poppets to be pushed away from the seat just before the axle contacts the axle stop. There are just 3 easy steps to follow to set poppets on a new TAS gear. 1. Set the axle stops. 2. Raise the front axle. 3. Steer the vehicle to full right and then full left turn with the engine at idle speed. When a TAS gear is built at the manufacturing plant, both poppet seats are pushed out. So setting poppets on a gear from the factory is easy. All you have to do is set the axle stops, raise the front axle, and steer the vehicle in full right and full left turns with the engine on. This turning will push the poppet seat in the proper amount for that vehicle. The poppet seat and sleeve are a pressed fit, so the seat will stay in this set position until it is reset. On a complete gear, the entire setting procedure will look something like this. Set the axle stops, raise the front axle so steer tires are off the ground, and steer full right and full left with the engine on. Now that you know how to set poppets on a new TAS gear, we'll show you how to reset the poppets. TAS poppets don't have to be reset unless the vehicle has been modified in such a way that wheel cut for the truck is decreased. If wheel cut is increased, the poppets will reset automatically. Examples of modifications that require poppet resetting are changing to larger tires, reducing wheel cut for any reason. If the steer axle U-bolts were bent or broken, if the pitman arm was mistimed and it's been retimed, axle stop bolts were damaged and have been replaced, or when the steering gear is mounted on a different vehicle. There are 12 steps used in the resetting process. 1. Set axle stops and warm up the system. 2. Assemble adjusting screw into nut. 3. Remove poppet stop bolt. 4. Turn adjusting screw assembly into the housing. 5. Refill the system reservoir. 6. Raise the front end so steer axle tires are off the ground. 7. Push the upper poppet out to prepare it for setting. 8. Set the upper poppet. 9. Temporarily back out the adjusting screw. 10. Position the lower poppet. 11. Position the adjusting screw. And 12. Lower the vehicle. Before resetting the poppets, you have to make sure the axle stops are set to vehicle manufacturer's wheel cut or clearance specifications. Your steering gear will have either a fixed stop bolt or an adjusting screw. If it has a fixed stop bolt, you'll need a new poppet adjusting screw and nut. Turn the screw into the non-sealing end of the jam nut until the Allen drive end of the screw is flush with the nut. If the adjusting screw is already part of the steering gear, back the nut off of the adjusting screw until it's flush with the Allen drive end of the adjusting screw. Make sure the engine is off and the road wheels are straight ahead. Remove the poppet fixed stop bolt and washer from the lower end of the housing and throw them away. Turn the adjusting screw and nut into the housing until the nut is snug using a 7/32 Allen wrench, and then tighten down the nut. Refill the reservoir if necessary and place a jack under the center of the front axle. Jack up the front end so the steer axle tires are off the ground. Next, start the engine and let it idle. Look at the output shaft timing marks and note which mark is nearest the housing piston bore. Turn the steering wheel in the direction that makes this timing mark move toward the adjusting screw you just installed. Turn in this direction until axle stop contact is made. Pull hard on the steering wheel after the axle stop is contacted. This will push the upper poppet out so it can be set automatically. Now, we'll set the upper poppet by simply turning the steering wheel in the opposite direction until the other axle stop is contacted. The timing mark on the output shaft will be pointed toward the input shaft. Again, when you reach the axle stop, pull hard on the steering wheel to set the poppet. Now you can let go of the steering wheel and shut off the engine. With the engine off, loosen the sealing nut and back out the adjusting screw until 1 inch is past the nut. Tighten the sealing nut against the housing. This will get the adjusting screw temporarily out of the way. Start the engine again and let it idle. Turn the steering wheel in the original direction with the end of the timing mark pointing toward the adjusting screw until axle stop contact is made. Pull hard on the steering wheel and hold it in this position for no more than 10 seconds and then release to allow the system to cool. Continue this hold and release process while the adjusting screw is being turned in. If the steering wheel is held at full turn for more than 10 seconds at a time, the heat buildup at pump relief pressure may damage system components. With the steering wheel held at full turn, loosen the jam nut and hold it with an open-end wrench so it won't contact the housing. Turn in the adjusting screw using finger pressure only until the Allen wrench comes to a stop. The adjusting screw will stop when it contacts the poppet seat. If the driver releases the wheel while you are turning the adjusting screw in, pause and wait until the wheel is again held at full turn before you continue turning the adjusting screw. When the adjusting screw comes to a stop, don't try to turn it in farther. Instead, back it out 3 1/4 turns and tighten the sealing nut. Torque the sealing nut to 35 foot-pounds. The resetting process is now complete. Lower the vehicle to the ground, remove the jack, and refill the reservoir if necessary. Now we'll go through the resetting process one more time with a complete gear so you can see how easy and quick it really is. First, make sure axle stops are set properly and warm up the system if it is cold. Assemble the adjusting screw into the nut until the end is flush. Make sure the engine is off and remove the fixed stop bolt. Screw the adjusting screw and nut assembly into the housing with the Allen drive end of the screw flush with the nut. Refill the reservoir to make up for fluid loss when the fixed stop bolt was removed. Raise the front axle. Turn the engine on and turn the steering wheel so the output shaft timing mark moves toward the adjusting screw. Pull hard on the steering wheel when you reach the end of travel. Turn in the other direction and again pull hard on the steering wheel at end of travel. Turn off the vehicle and back out the adjusting screw 1 inch. Start the engine and steer in the original direction, timing marked toward the adjusting screw. Pull hard on the steering wheel at end of travel. Turn in the adjusting screw until it stops. Back out the adjusting screw 3 1/4 turns and tighten and torque the nut. That's all there is to it. Don't forget to lower the vehicle, remove the jack, and fill the reservoir if required. The final set position of the adjusting screw may be different for each vehicle because of axle settings, degree of axle cut reduction, and other factors. But there are 2 important things to be aware of. 1, leave the adjusting screw in the gear. It is now part of the TAS steering gear. 2, the adjusting screw cannot stick out more than 1 1/16 inch beyond the nut for proper thread engagement. We've given you a lot of information in this video in an effort to help you understand how poppets work and to familiarize you with the setting and resetting procedures recommended by TRW. Please review this video and Service Bulletin number TAS-101 until you feel comfortable with the procedures. That concludes this TRW Commercial Steering Division videotape presentation.